You're listening to the Cantina Cast, your home for thought-provoking Star Wars talk. Join Adler and Jonesy in breaking down the latest news, trailers, movies, and of course, your favorite characters from a galaxy far, far away.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Cantina Cast. My name is Albert Padilla, and this is episode 528, our coverage of Dark Legends, A Gilded Cage. So we're in the Halloween spirit, and we figured, you know what? Let's go back to the well that is the 2020 novel Dark Legends by George Mann, chock full of all of these kind of cool, spooky, scary stories from Star Wars. Maybe as scary as Star Wars can get. And we're going to talk a little bit about that here in a little bit. But, you know, there's an old saying that says nothing brings two people together like a good possession. And that's exactly what we have here with this story tonight. And speaking of two people, here's my other person. Lauren's with us tonight. Lauren, how's it going? Welcome to the show.
It's good. That was a great intro. I am the second person. So
yeah. Now, who's possessing who, though? That's the thing.
Right. Who knows?
Yeah. So this is kind of, you know, we were actually going to do two of these and scheduling just didn't happen. But I feel like we got the better one of the three that we were. Not to say that they're all, I think all of them have their own, you know, pros and cons. But I particularly like this one just because of the main character. And we'll talk about him, of course, in greater detail in just 1 second. But before we get started, let's get the pleasantries out of the way. I want to say thank you to all of our now part of the tribe members, especially Rob, Mike Borda, you, Lauren. Thank you so much, Lauren. Appreciate that. Dante, Riss Bayless, Justin, Jackson, Sharkman, Dan, Daz, Isabella, Uncle Leon, Josh C., and Jacob. Plus our Delusions of Grandeur tour, which is Rod, CJ, Alex, Steve, and now Daz. And Daz is going to be with us this Sunday for the Patreon show when we do our Ahsoka recap. So thank you, Daz, for upgrading and jumping to the very top there. Really, really do appreciate that. If you guys are interested in Patreon, you can head out to cantinacast.com/Patreon and sign up there. There's all kinds of different, you know, monetary stuff that you can pay for. It just depends on what you're looking for. And on top of that, go out to cantinacast.com/YouTube and check out our YouTube channel. Lauren, I'm going to segue to you. It's not in the show notes, so surprise. What do you got going on, the Jedi Novel Archive?
So I'm doing another little Halloween special for Jedi Novel Archive, which is I'm going to be covering Tales of the Death Star, which is the comic that recently came out, which is kind of like a horror, spooky sort of Star Wars comic. So I'm looking forward to getting into that one.
Yeah, written by Cavan Scott, who is, I mean, he's probably etched his name as the formidable, scary Star Wars scary writer, right? I mean, he's done so many other things. We'll talk. That comic was wasn't it like 90 pages or something? It was pretty large, if I remember correctly.
I mean, it's a pretty good length. Yeah. So there's a lot of good stuff in there. And yeah, I agree. Cavan Scott, I mean, I love pretty much everything he does, but he is very good at just writing some kind of unsettling things. So I definitely feel like he's the right writer for this type of a story.
Yeah. And we'll talk more about Cavan Scott in a little bit because we're going to get into some of that here as well. I want to say a belated happy birthday to Mike Rondo, the creator of the show, who's long since left the show, but it was his birthday yesterday. We were supposed to do this. And I used to call him the Dark Lord of podcasting because he is kind of a jerk and evil at times. But I want to say happy birthday because I love him. So happy birthday, Mike. Hope you had a wonderful birthday. All right, let's see what else we got. Let's talk about the story. So the Gilded Cage. So before we do, I want to ask you because I honestly don't know, and I started thinking about this like, oh, I don't know if this is going to be a good subject to bring up, but like what? How much are you into Halloween? How much are you into the spooky, the scary, that kind of stuff?
I love Halloween. Honestly,
really? Okay.
Yeah, it's my favorite time of year. I get super into Christmas too, but Halloween just has a special place in my heart. So, yeah, I've got my Jack sweatshirt on for the occasion.
Oh.
So, yeah, I love Halloween. I get super into it. I don't like anything too scary though. Like I'll get scared easily, but I love the sort of like dark feelings and dressing up and all of that kind of stuff.
Right. I kind of like Star Wars probably teeters into the dark, but not like the gore, the horrific graphic kind of stuff. I mean, I don't think it'll ever probably go there, quite honestly. The closest we get are with like Sith, some of the Sith stories. Well, I've got some examples here in a little bit that we'll talk about. But like outside of Star Wars, do you get into like when you think about movies, right? That's the first thing I think most people think of when they think of scary stuff outside of Halloween. What are some of the movies that you've like scary movies that have influenced you or things that you would go back and watch?
Okay, scary movies, like horror movies, I am the biggest baby about. But like how but during Halloween season, I love like Tim Burton movies like Corpse Bride, Nightmare Before Christmas. I've got to do a rewatch of the Coppola version of Dracula. Like I love
Oh,
that
that's a
type
good
of
one.
stuff.
Hmm.
Yeah, so not anything too much in the like straight up horror. I like reading horror because I feel like my brain is a little bit more in control of how scary I let myself imagine it.
Sorry. Yep. Sorry, I didn't mean to hit the mic there. I was laughing. I'll edit that out. Uh,
So, yeah, reading
plus
horror
you
is
can
good,
like,
watching horror, no.
yeah. Plus you can cover up sentences if you need to, and just skip over that paragraph because I
I
really
mean,
don't
like,
want to know what's going
yeah,
on.
skip that part. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Right. Okay. Well, I had on here like the Halloween franchise, Scream, Exorcist, Paranormal Activity, The
Yeah.
Conjuring, Annabelle, some of that stuff.
Mm-mm.
No. Okay.
You know, it's funny that you mentioned The Conjuring, though, because I read like the true backstory of The Conjuring, and I'm
Yes.
super fascinated by that. But the movie The Conjuring, no, never gonna happen. I cannot watch that.
It's actually one of the better series, I think, honestly. Better horror series that have come out here. And then I think one of the first ones that ever scared the crap, well, outside of The Exorcist, which I was way too little to have seen in retrospect. So, Mom, I don't know what you were doing at that time, but the other one was the Blair Witch Project, which I saw at the theaters when it was like mass, mayhem and hysteria. And, when that first launched, it was a weird time. But that's another one that really, the one that's bothered me the most recently is Midsummer. Have you seen, well, I don't,
I saw the ads for it, and whew, that looks scary. So no.
it's not even like, I don't know that it's scary. It's just very unsettling and very
Hmm.
disturbing, especially the very end. It's just, I'll never watch it again just because I didn't like the way it made me feel, quite
Oh
honestly.
wow, it did
Yeah.
look very stressful, so I could see that.
Yeah. Okay. So how about let's talk about Star Wars. Have you, outside of the stuff that, we've already talked about here, is there anything else that you've read, that's been scary from Star Wars? And then like, where do you feel like, does it have its place? Cause I know some folks feel like, I really don't want zombies. I don't want witches. I don't want any of this stuff. I want lightsabers and Jedi, dark side, light side, blasters, Imperials, that sort of thing. But I don't know about this other magic, witchy stuff. But where do you feel like it has a place here?
I definitely feel like it has a place. I mean, the Star Wars universe is huge. I mean, I feel like there's plenty of room for lots of Jedi and lightsabers and to also have like a little bit more of that creepy side too. I don't think it has to just be one or the other. So
Hmm.
I've really enjoyed getting into, I mean, ever since we started covering some of the stories from Dark Legends, especially, I've really enjoyed getting into these types of stories because it's kind of just, it's making me interact with Star Wars storytelling in a little bit of a different way than the way that I always have. So I really
Hmm.
appreciate it for that reason.
Yeah. And I'm with you. Like, I think it does have its place. It's not beyond the realm of impossible in Star Wars, given how large the galaxy is. And I think they've done a pretty good job. There, I talked about it, I think, on the last episode that we did. I was talking about Galaxy of Fear, which that came out in the mid 90s, I think. And it was like Star Wars' Goosebumps. And I remember reading those. I was in my 20s at that point, but they were obviously kids' books, and they were fine. I mean, it was hard to find Star Wars anything in the mid 90s, so you just kind of grabbed whatever you could and ran with
Yeah.
it. But yeah, there was that series that came out. There's the Red Harvest and the Death Troopers, which was kind of like the zombies and we got some of that in the finale there of Ahsoka. We've talked about Kevin Scott, and what I would say is kind of like what you said. There's the Vader's Castle series of comics that he did a couple years ago. That's again spooky stuff. But if you follow Cavan and you see what he watches and reads, like he is like the master of horror. I mean, he's all about horror and stuff like that. So if there's any one person that can bring this in, it's definitely him. But to your point, in those High Republic novels, there are passages and there are moments in there where like he kind of borders the I'm gonna say this horror, but definitely borders on the side of very dark, especially the way things are written or just the shock value of some things that you're not expecting. And he's got a reputation now for killing off characters that you've just become invested in and loved,
Mm.
and die horrible deaths at
That's a
times.
sore subject.
I know it really is, but we love him for that, right? I mean, we love him because he does such a good job of that.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's one just quickly. Have you heard of Nobot?
No. Should
Okay.
I have?
Maybe not, honestly. So I'll make this very quick. So Nobot, for the longest time, at least as I remember, it was like one of the few scary stories in Star Wars way back in Legends time. And this droid, you can see this droid in the Phantom Menace, I think. I think it's in the Phantom Menace, or maybe I don't know. It's one of the prequel films. But there's a protocol, 3PO droid, kind of protocol droid that comes into scene, and he looks kind of weird, and he's kind of moving. He looks deranged. The backstory, as best as I remember, is that this robot suddenly showed up on Tatooine. It had blood all over him, and his voice recorder was messed up. Like, he couldn't speak. His voice box was all messed up. And so everyone, he would speak gibberish and just wander like aimlessly around the town. And every once in a while, suddenly he would play back the screams of this woman that was being murdered. And so the local legend in Tatooine was that Nobot went crazy, killed his master, recorded it, and then wandered into the stage, and has been wandering around like aimlessly ever since then, right?
Whoa.
So it's kind of dark.
Oh my God.
The funny thing was they brought this thing into Lego Star Wars. Like, I forget what it is, like one of the scary Halloween episodes they did for Lego Star Wars. They brought Nobot in. And he's in the game. I think he's in one of the games too, and he's just as crazy. He's like really weird. It's very trippy, but that's about as scary as I could think of. I was trying to really think of other things. I mean, we got like Plagueis, and we've got Darth Vader. I've got all the Sith Lords. What was the other guy's name from Shadow of the Sith? Viceroy Exum Panchard, right? And how he was murdering people, and the blood was all over the mask. And I mean, we've got some pretty dark stuff in there, but. Any of that stuff? What else? I guess what else is scary to you in Star Wars? Is there anything else that comes to mind?
I mean, yeah, the most obvious things I can think of are definitely the Sith Lords. I mean, there's lots of material there. Also, just thinking about like the history of the Sith. I mean, there's a lot of just weird, bizarre sort of magic and like Sith history. I mean, it's so dense that sometimes to the point it's hard to keep it all straight, but there's definitely no shortage of just like creepy sort of like rituals and legends and just storytelling, even outside of this particular collection. I just feel like it's all throughout Star Wars if you know where to look for it.
Yeah. We should do that. Like, someone needs to put a collection of all that together. I'm sure other websites have done it at some point, but okay, well, listen, let's get into our story, which is A Gilded Cage. And I'm going to turn it over to you to kind of give us the high level elevator pitch synopsis or summary, whatever we want to call it for this short story.
Okay, so this story starts off, it introduces us to Darth Caldoth. Everyone hates him, especially the Nightsisters. Jedi hate him. I mean, everybody. He has no friends pretty much because he's so powerful and horrible. And one thing that he wants to do to enhance his power is he wants to learn some of the Night Sister magic, particularly the whole thing about the Army of the Dead. And so to do this, he actually robs a grave on Dathomir, which of course angers the Night Sisters, and they need to get revenge on him because they viewed this as like an act of war pretty much. And so, but they don't attack him immediately. They're biding their time and they're waiting until the right moment. And sounds like they wait for quite a while. And once Darth Caldoth suffers a defeat at the hands of a Jedi, this defeat is unrelated to the Night Sister issue, but he's defeated by the Jedi Branath Morath. And so he's vulnerable at this point. So they decide that now's the time to strike. And they host this sort of trial with multiple younger Night Sisters, where they subject them to all sorts of crazy sorts of tests. And the one that comes out the strongest at the end of all these tests is named Zeldin. And so they choose her to be the designated person to kind of be responsible for retaliating against Caldoth. And Zeldin, she knows that this is her duty, but she pretty much has a bad feeling about it from the start. She's kind of unsettled about the whole thing, but she's going to go forward with it anyway. And the way that they decide that they're going to go after him is she's going to infiltrate his thoughts and just kind of subtly influence him, kind of just try to direct the course of his life to ultimately, hopefully, end with his own demise. But she can't do it too obviously because they don't want him to know what they're doing, because they pretty much feel like if he knows, then he's going to kill them all. And so the way that they decide what they're going to do is they have this prognostication ritual. And what that means is that they're looking into the future. They're trying to see, like, okay, what are the most effective things in his life that we could mess with? And so this ritual leads them to make 3 different attempts, which we'll get more into the details of what exactly those attempts are here in a minute. But all 3 of those attempts go wrong. And the reason that they go wrong is because the future that they saw in the ritual, they actually misinterpreted it. And so at the end of that 3rd attempt that goes bad, they're like, okay, this is stupid. Let's just finish this once and for all. Like, we're spending a lot of time on this.
Yep.
And so they send Zeldin to actually fully possess him. Like, this is not subtle anymore. She's fully entering his mind, and they're going to try to finish him off this way. And when they're going through the process of Zeldin infiltrating his mind, she feels like she's actually successfully doing it. And it seems like for a minute that she is successful, but then all of a sudden he turns around. It turns out that he knew she was doing this the whole time, and he traps her in his mind. So in a way, she was successful in possessing him, but now she's trapped in his mind too. So now they're both in there. She can't get back in her own body. Her sisters abandon her because they feel like they can't really do anything else now. And so she's just stuck like that forever. And then that's the end.
It's literally how it ends. Yep. Yeah. And
Yeah.
on top of that, like he can hear her screaming the entire time, and he just draws from that. Like, I think it ends with him smirking or smiling, knowing that she is forever trapped in his mind, which is just, crazy to think about.
Yeah.
But
And he's getting joy out of her suffering too, which
Yeah.
is crazy. Yeah.
So I really like this story. Again, it's not very long. I love this character, Darth Caldoth. We'll talk about him in just a second. But there's a lot of world building that happens in these short stories. They throw a lot of names out there. Obsidia, which is a planet that was referenced. I think there's a reference to Mortis. I don't know if you caught that.
I don't know if I did catch that.
Okay, good, because I have
You
it in
need
the
to
show
point
notes,
that out to me.
but
Yeah.
I didn't share it with you. We'll get to that here in a second. But it did feel very like Sithy. I like the fact that it's talking about the Nightsisters, of course. I mean, all that feels very much similar to it's all in the spirit of Halloween and spookiness. So I was going to pull a picture up here because I want to talk about Darth Caldoth, and this is him right here. So he's a Duros. This is not the first time he's been in a Star Wars short story. George Mann actually wrote a story about him in Myths and Fables, which is one of the 3 attempts that we're going to talk about here in a little bit as well. The funny thing was, his first technical appearance came out in the, what was it?
Dooku Jedi Lost.
Dooku Jedi Lost, yeah. And the story is that, if you guys know, Cavan Scott, George Mann, they're like thick as thieves. Like they're buddies, and they've been buddies for I don't know how long now. And I guess at some point, George Mann said, oh, yeah, I'm writing, a short story, and I'm putting this Darth Caldoth that I came up with in that short story. And Cavan was like, cool, I'm going to stick him in Dooku. So Dooku comes out first, and then it was Myths and Fables came out, and then finally we get this story here with him. So I love I love this character. He's awesome, and he's very much feared. Like I said, like Lauren said, everybody in the galaxy hates this guy. At this point, which I'm going to assume is after, it has to be. It's after the rule of 2. I don't have a sense as far how back that goes, in canon anyways.
Mm-hmm.
But definitely he is kind of at the height of his power. Like, it talks about warlords, the Jedi, Nightsisters. Everybody hates this guy. Everybody fears this guy. He's that powerful. He's almost like the Palpatine of his time. And he's very similar to, I would say, most Jedi, like Palpatine, maybe even Luke Skywalker. Throughout this entire kind of short story, he's going around and collecting all kinds of relics and artifacts, trying to gain whatever knowledge he can to become more powerful and have, the upper hand eventually. I mean, it's like all other Sith, right? All he wants to do is kind of dominate the galaxy. But I just love a lot of that cross-reference stuff, a lot of the references, the world building that came in this. And the other thing about him was something else I was going to mention. I just lost it right now. We'll move on though. But so I guess for his the first attempt, do you want to just kind of get into those here, or where do you want to go with this?
Yeah, yeah, I could outline the attempts. Okay, so as you mentioned, the first attempt, we do have a short story about that, also written by George Mann, which kind of gives us a little bit more details. But this short story does give us kind of a crash course in what exactly happened. So, one of the visions that the Night Sisters see is he has an apprentice named Nimbus. And based on this vision, they feel that this apprentice will eventually betray him and will lead to his downfall. So, Zeldin, she kind of she influences him to, based on the vision that they see, she influences him to actually take on this apprentice and spend all this time with him in the hopes that the apprentice will eventually turn on him. But what ends up happening is the apprentice does turn on him, but not very good, because the his attack backfires and the apprentice ends up turning himself into stone. And so Darth Caldoth, I mean, obviously comes out of that encounter successful and leaves his calcified body just there for anyone to see. So that attempt is a big fail.
So that reminded me too of like the High Republic, right? The fact that the body was calcified. I just wonder if there was
Mhm.
anything related there. I'm gonna pull this off. We don't need to see him anymore. He's ugly. I just wonder if there was anything like if there was some kind of relation to what we're getting with the High Republic stuff. I'm forgetting this stinking name now.
The
Um,
leveler.
yeah, the Leveler, right?
I will say with the leveler though, they kind of turn into a hollow husk that then crumbles. So I feel
That's
like
true.
his body wouldn't have lasted that long if
Yeah,
it was anything related to that.
that's true.
To
No,
get
you're right.
into specifics of the type of the type of
Type
body
of
that's left
calcification that
behind.
happens. Yeah, the level at which it happens here.
Yeah.
So let's talk about Zeldin really quick, because that was interesting that they picked her. I mean, they talked about how she was a very young Night Sister. She wasn't very well experienced, so she was very powerful, had a lot of potential, but she was scared of Darth Caldoth.
Yeah. And this is kind of what I was thinking as I was reading this, as I was like, why did they not choose someone more experienced? Like, did you have any theories about why that could be? Like, I get it that she showed a lot of promise. She passed the trial, but like, why even go through this trial with all these younger Night Sisters? If it's this high stakes of an issue, why not choose a witch that's more experienced that has a higher probability of being successful?
Yeah, I'm with you. I thought about that. I don't know that I have a good theory. I just wonder if it was, maybe it is they were sticking to the rule of law. The ritual states that you have to go through, whoever comes out of the trials and whoever is able to, survive the torment. I mean, she was physically abused at some point. I think they had her chained to like a pillar, as
Mm-hmm.
part of the selection process. And then they were like infusing her mind with like images of all the people that she had killed over the years. And she had to
Mm-hmm.
relive those memories. On top of that, they were, I don't even know. There was all kinds of crazy stuff that were happening. And maybe it's just they stick to the letter of the law. And it's like, okay, whoever comes out of this, regardless of who, whether they're young or old, is who we have to pick, because that's what it says and that's what we've done for forever. But I'm with you. Like, it seems like they would have gone with somebody who had a stronger mind, or maybe somebody who's done this before. I don't know. I don't know how often this is done, but I do like the idea of Night Sisters possessing people. Like, it's a really cool aspect that I don't think we've ever seen before. Not exactly like this.
Yeah. Well, and I guess the best theory I could come up with as to why they wanted a younger Night Sister to do it was, I mean, I guess they have to learn somehow how to do these things, and I guess it's just kind of like one of those things where it's like literally a trial by fire. Like, okay, you got to learn how to do this. Like, there you go do it.
But yeah, and it's like, here's the most powerful Dark Lord in the galaxy, right? For your first shot.
No
No
pressure.
pressure. We're all counting on you, kind of thing. We should also mention too, like what Darth Caldoth was looking for was he actually knew that the Night Sisters were able to reanimate, and he went there to steal one. He steals one of the pods, like one of the Night Sister pods. And if you watch the
Mhm.
Clone Wars, you know what we're talking about here. They hang the Night Sisters when they die. They put them in these pods, and I think they're like Rancor skins or something. They hang them from the trees, and so like this is macabre kind of scene when you get there. And the reason they do that is because if they ever need to, they can reanimate the sisters as defense. So your duty in protection of Dathomir isn't over as a Night Sister when you die. You're still on that planet, and you still will serve if they're ever called upon, unless
Yeah.
Dooku blows up the planet, whatever, or obliterates the planet.
Yeah.
But yes, anyways, he tries to go steal that, and so when he does, and I think he was successful if I remember correctly, he was able to steal one.
He does. Yeah. He literally does like a grave robbing.
yeah, he actually robbed the grave, the whole grave. But yeah, so he steals that, and so that's when they're seeking revenge. And I just remembered too the okay. So I want to go back. I'm sorry. We'll go to the second one here in a second, but let's just take a quick break. There is you mentioned that at one point here they decided to attack him because he had just had a battle with Jedi Bran Ath Morath. Okay, which is a mouthful to say.
I know. Yeah, I was practicing earlier.
But listen to this line. I know you did really well. I totally
Thank
screwed
you.
that up. Listen to this line and tell me what you think of when you hear this. Okay, this is when he's talking about Caldoth and why he went to a temple on Bathoris, which is where he confronts Jedi Bran Ath Morath. Okay,
Bran for short.
Bran for short. Jedi Bran.
Yeah.
All right. It says Caldoth had become aware of a rare fragment of fresco relating to the ancients and their look at you and their use of the Force that had been uncovered during a Jedi expedition and transferred to their temple on Bathoris.
Yeah, I don't know how I missed that. Yeah.
That is, in my head, that is the mural that they had at the end of in Star Wars Rebels.
It has to be. I don't know what else that could be about, honestly.
I mean, it's a
now
fresco.
that you say it. Yeah.
It's the ancients. Those are the ancients, the Mortis family. So yeah. I thought it was great. I love it. And to think that it was on the Temple of Bathoris at some point, and then, eventually makes its way to Lothal. There's a whole story there. Like, how did that happen? And he was almost successful. That's crazy. So that means he probably was well aware of the world between worlds, or at least had some, maybe done some research and knew about it. But he almost had it. He almost had the whole thing until all of these Jedi started showing up. And he's like, killing these guys off one by one. But until Jedi Bran shows up, he's able, it's almost a stalemate at first. And then suddenly more, temple guards come in, more Jedi. He just gets overwhelmed and he leaves wounded from that battle as well. And so that's what made him vulnerable for the Night Sisters to enter his mind, or so they thought. So anyways, I thought that was a really cool little nugget, especially since we're on the, tail end, or we just came off of the Ahsoka series and we've been talking a lot about Mortis. I just love the fact that he included that in there. But
yeah, that's very cool. I love that tie-in.
Yeah. Okay. So back to you. What was the second attempt that the Night Sisters made?
Okay. So the second attempt has to do with, again, when it comes to his desire to hunt down these relics. So they foresee that when he goes to hunt down a certain relic, that a guardian spirit that is guarding the relic where it's housed in this temple, because of course these relics, where they're being housed, there's usually like some kind of trap or like some sort of challenge. You can't just go get the relic whenever you want. It's like, it's a whole process and a whole big deal to go get it. And so for this particular one, there is a guardian spirit that's there, that's guarding it. And what they saw in the vision was that the guardian spirit would be more powerful than Darth Caldoth and would kill him. And so Zeldin is trying to get him to want to go get that particular relic that guardian spirit is guarding. So she basically feels like she's leading him into a trap where he's going to end up dying. But what ends up happening is when he gets there, so she successfully influences him, or so she believes. When he gets there to get the relic, what he actually gets, he's not interested in the relic at all. He actually captures the guardian spirit using Night Sister magic and kidnaps a guardian spirit to probably make it do his bidding, or we never really find out exactly where that goes, but it's probably nothing good. And so that second attempt is another fail.
Yeah. And what had me scratching my head on this one was Mann makes it a point to say that when he's uttering this Night Sister spell, like that spell is only known to the Night Sisters, right? He makes it very clear that only the Night Sisters would know. And I'm thinking, well, then how would he know? And at this point, again, we've already talked about the spoiler at the very end, but at this point you're scratching your head thinking, how could he have known this? But now in retrospect, you know that at some point he allowed Zeldin to come in, but he was like traversing her memory and learning knowledge from her the entire time. And that's what led him to go capture this, which I think was like a Jedi monk that was kind of haunting this temple or whatever it was. I think it was on Kiza. Was that what? Or no, that's the next one here. Obsidia. That was the name of the planet.
Obsidia.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that moon was also very dangerous too. So that's another reason why she felt like if the guardian spirit didn't get him, the moon would. But I mean, he was too smart for that as well. So
Yeah. And he left the relic there. Like as soon as he had the
yeah,
guardian,
he didn't even care.
yeah, he like churned and walked away and almost smiled because the relic is, I don't know what it was. That's the, the intriguing part of it. You have no idea, but they made it sound like this thing was super powerful, and yet he walked away because I think honestly he's probably got something more useful now in this, demon or possession, whatever this thing is, a spirit that he can kind of use to, as a guardian himself or learn from. Oh, I think he was going to use. Yeah, they said something like he was going to use torture him and try to get knowledge from this spirit about how he came to be and all that. So
Right.
yeah, this guy's a bad mofo, man. I'm telling you right now.
Yeah.
All right, what about the third one? Third attempt.
Okay. Yes. So attempt number 3 also has to do with Jedi Bran for short. And pretty much what happens is when they do the ritual and they see this version of the future, they see Jedi Bran's lightsaber stab him through. And so when they see that, they're like, oh, so if he has a rematch with Bran, then he's going to get killed. And so we need to make him angry enough to try to have a rematch, pretty much. And so what Zeldin does is she's influencing him with she's kind of like sending hatred and anger and like the desire for revenge into his mind, hoping that that gets transferred onto his feelings about Bran. And what ends up happening is that he does end up luring Bran to him by going and leveling a whole city on a planet that's near where Bran is based. So when the Jedi come to address the fact that he's just destroyed this whole city, of course, Bran is going to be with them.
Mm-hmm.
And so they have a duel that lasts like all day. Like it's like the longest duel ever. And it sounds like one of the main things that's keeping Caldoth going is the hatred that Zeldin was actually sending to him. So I thought that was pretty interesting, how he's actually kind of feeding off of her for energy in this fight. And eventually what happens is after this duel goes on for forever, he comes up with the idea that he's actually going to stab himself with Bran's lightsaber. He kind of just like lunges himself like onto it pretty much. And when he does that, it throws Bran off because Bran is like, what the heck just happened? And that split second is all it takes for Caldoth to kill Bran. So that third attempt is also a fail.
Yeah. He beheads him. Like he cuts his head off with the lightsaber.
Yeah.
To be specific, not to be too graphic, but
Yeah.
I thought that was kind of a nice little.
You had to bring up the beheading.
It's our spooky episode. We only get to do this once a year.
True. Okay.
No, but I did enjoy that part of it. And there was also the story in the same book. We talked about, remember Dark Noxus, and she had that scythe and she was cutting people's heads off. She was known for beheading all of her victims as well. But yeah, this I love the lightsaber, using that as a way to kind of distract him and just give him that split second that he needed to kind of win the battle. And of course, he walks away completely wounded, but he definitely got his revenge. And I don't know what else there is to say. It's a great little scene there. I just love the fact of like how mad the Nightsisters are at this point, because this is now the third time they've been foiled by him. They're still not picking this up.
Yeah.
And the fact that they just they go all in and are like, that's it. We're going full possession, right? Zeldin, get in there. We're tired of messing around. None of this little, move it here, move it there kind of thing to get them to kind of do their bidding. I just love the fact that they got really mad about that.
Well, and they kept like misinterpreting the visions. And this got me to thinking about, I feel like this is something I was recently thinking about when I read the Yoda comic, where it's like, this question is raised again of how seriously should visions be taken? Because when a Jedi has a Force vision, it's always a super complicated situation where it's like, okay, how real is this? And then the Nightsisters had the same issue where they're seeing stuff happen, but some of it either was just like a different version of what they thought it was going to be, or like in the case of this third attempt, it's the thing that they literally saw they actually misinterpreted what it was that they were seeing. I mean, that
Hmm.
thing still happened, but in a completely different way than what they thought. And that's why they kept failing, is because they're relying on something that's just really not very reliable. I just thought it was interesting. It took 3 tries for them to be like, maybe this isn't a very good plan.
Right. Maybe they'd never done this before. Now they say that. Maybe this is like some like, they hadn't tried it in 500 years and they thought, why don't we do this more often? I don't know. Oh, let's just try it again then. 500
Yeah.
years ago, somebody was like, screw this. This is terrible. Let's never do this again.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think it's consistent. Like there are so many examples, and we've covered many on this show before, where the force visions are just a terrible way about going to predict anything. Like it never ever has turned. Well, that's not true. There are a couple of examples where it was almost exact, and I want to say it was in Master and Apprentice. You remember the ending to that one where I think it was Kenobi had the Force vision, or maybe it was Qui-Gon. I forget now. It's been like 3 years since we read that story. But in Master and Apprentice, that was pretty spot on. And we even debated like how come he got to see everything, and there really wasn't a big deviance. But if you think about Palpatine, he was one of the ones that was really all about Force visions, and a lot of times he got that stuff wrong. As much as he relied on it, Dooku got it wrong many times.
I
Um,
think, speaking of Dooku, I do think that in Dooku Jedi Lost, there might have been at least one or maybe more than one example of Sifo Dyas having a Force vision that did come true.
yes, but I think so. I always felt like that was his gift, right? And I think they even if it wasn't in that
It
book,
was,
I
yeah.
think
He
they
was
talked about it.
particularly strong in it.
Particularly
Yeah.
strong in Force vision. So he's one that I would be like, is a reliable source. But most of these other Jedi and Sith, even the Nightsisters, they're just not there. And they always misinterpret, which I think is really cool. Because in my head, it's like the Force saying, see, can't go messing with the future, right? We're
Hmm.
trying to keep these people in check, except on somebody like Sifo Dyas. But yeah, I do like that. I love the fact that it doesn't always go as right. And I think it plays into like our own folktale, right? If somebody has a vision or someone thinks something's going to go a certain way and suddenly it changes at the very end, and there's a lesson to be learned there, right? There's many fables that turn out that way. So I think it
Yeah.
certainly all lines up with what we're used to here. Um, yeah. So the very end, him getting we talked about her being trapped in the Gilded Cage, and, him smirking and just kind of walking away. And then the Night Sisters at that point, they don't ever go back. Like they never try to they just leave him the hell alone at this point.
I know that they sure got over the whole revenge thing like really fast. Like
Yeah.
I was kind of like, really? She did all of this for you, and you're just gonna leave her like that? Like that was awful.
Well, and it went on years. I don't the very end. Like I was thinking, okay, this is like in the span of a couple months or something. But at the very end of the book, I think it's after, I forget what line it is, somewhere towards the very end, that last story when he possesses her, and it's all coming back, and she realizes, holy crap, he's been in my mind this entire time. He's been stealing my stuff. He's been feeding off my energy, my anger to make him more powerful. It's in that couple passages here that you realize that this has not been a slow possession. This was a long game, long play
Yeah.
that the Night Sisters were doing, and so it covered many years to get to this point where they finally try to do the full possession. So yeah,
Yeah. Well, and
interesting.
even the first attempt alone, just thinking about, I mean, how long it takes to build a relationship with an apprentice for them to stick around and, wait for that to happen even. I mean,
Hmm.
that by itself must have taken a long time.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. But yeah, overall, I thought it's a great story. And there's still plenty more. Like we've not even. I think there's what is there like eight in this book or something? I forget now. So this is
something
the
like
book.
that.
I'll
Yeah.
show it up again. Oh, I think we've shown it many times before, but it's tiny. It's like a tiny little book. But I do love the way he writes. George Mann writes. I mean, clearly we've got some stuff from him now in the High Republic. He's got Eye of Darkness coming out. Which have you read that yet?
No, but I think I'm going to start it this weekend.
I think I'm going to start it this weekend as well. So,
Okay. You'll have to let me know what you're thinking. The
but
cover's amazing on that book. I can't
yes,
wait.
yeah.
I'm excited about the cover alone.
I know it's pretty wicked. But yes, I mean George Mann, he's got that. He's got a couple other stuff that I think he's done. He's got the Myths and Fables. We've covered, I think, some stuff from that. And I think you and I are going to get together this Christmas and cover something from the Life Day collection
Yes.
as
Yeah,
well.
we totally should do that. I mean, I love the way that he writes the short stories because I feel like it's like you said, like it's not a huge book and the stories themselves are pretty short, but it just feels like there's a lot there. I mean,
Hmm.
like this story we've, been talking about for a while now. And I mean, I still feel like there's even more to say if you want,
Yeah.
like there's just so much packed into these that I just feel like they're super fun to talk about. So I'm excited to talk about some Life Day ones too.
Yeah, and here's something else. Jonesy, I think it was Jonesy that asked me earlier this week. We were texting back and forth, force, back and forth, and he asked me. He's like, "So, what was the final say on like the legends stuff, like dark legends, myths, and fables? Right? Are they canon or are they not? Like they've been really squirrely about whether these are canon or not. The way I explained it, and the way I've always interpreted it, is these like the events happened, but the details may be a little bit off because they are legends. They've been told many times over and over the course of
Mhm.
thousands of years at this point. And so, so is it canon? Yeah, I think these stories are canon, but the details are not. I don't know. I kind of like that, even though it does go against everything that's written, everything that's put out as far as movies and television are all canon. I do like the gray in this. I think there's just something that gives it a bit of a mystique to it as well. So maybe that's a clear answer. Maybe it's not, but
Yeah.
I
Well,
always
there's
take
more
these as
room for
canon.
interpretation as well, which is fun. Where with
Yeah,
canon stuff, there's not always that much room for interpretation. And with these, you could kind of take it in different directions.
yeah, yeah. That's a good point. That's a very good point. Hey, before we go, I did want to say thank you too to these guys. So Star Wars books for I don't know if you saw this, but the Jedi Brave in Every Way. It's a kid's book. This is Charles Soule and his daughter that wrote this.
Oh, that's so cute.
Have you seen this book, Lauren?
I've seen like the images, but I haven't like actually read it.
So
Oh, I
you've seen
love
that,
that.
right?
Yes.
Okay, that's the Firebrand.
Yeah.
I'm showing the Firebrand and Belle and Ember.
Love Belle and Ember so
Yeah.
much.
So they're not really part of the story, but they're like little cameos in the book, which I thought was really cool. But
That's
it's actually a
cool.
really good story.
Really?
Yeah. No,
Oh.
it's great. So thank you for sending that because my kids now have that to listen to me read that to them, which is a lot of fun to do. They usually get bored after like halfway through it, but maybe it's my voices. I'm
You
still working on
can
my
read
Yoda.
it to yourself.
There's a lot of Yoda in here, and that's like I don't know. It's like really difficult. It's like swallowing a cucumber and trying to talk at the same time. It just doesn't work.
Yeah, it doesn't really roll off the tongue very well.
No, no. Cool. Anything else you want to say about this short story?
I mean, I like the insight that it gave us into the way that the Night Sisters do things overall cuz I mean, the way that they went about this was very interesting. So, I feel like in addition to it being a fun story, something else I kind of got out of it was just thinking about like the way that and I mean, of course, like we've seen them do this in Clone Wars. Like it's not all entirely new information, but anytime we get to see an example of the Night Sisters kind of like having some sort of like, I don't know, plan to do something, I just find that super interesting. So I feel like the story gave us some cool little tidbits of info about them too.
Yeah, yeah. Again, it always just continues to deepen the mystique of the Night Sisters, and certainly that of scary Star Wars, which I think we both agreed probably need more of. So
Yeah, I'm
yeah,
totally down with that.
yeah. So not a hard sell, but go out, pick this book up, either physical copy or download it. It's a lot of fun to read. So. Okay, well, we'll leave the episode there. Before we get out of here, I want to say thank you to everybody that joined the live feed tonight. Let's see, I got Alexandra, Jack, Alex, Sky, Kathy, Danny, Diamond Figs, and Cube Dude. I think I got everybody. Thank you guys for joining us on a live show. And sorry about the reschedule. It was just things kind of happened and we had to do that. But thanks everybody that joined us tonight. Again, don't forget this Sunday, we've got a Patreon exclusive show where we're going to, Lauren, you'll be on that show with me.
Yes.
Yeah, as well as I think we've got 5 people, maybe even 6 people at this point. So probably about a 2-hour show. I'm kidding. It's probably going to be about an hour, 15 minutes, I would imagine. So no more than that. But we're going to do an Ahsoka recap. So we're going to roundtable and just kind of have a discussion about how we felt the series went, what worked, what didn't. We'll have some speculative questions around where the series goes and some of the threads that were left hanging at the very end there. So that'll be a lot of fun. You can join us live at 9 p.m. for that show. And then next week, at some point, I haven't locked this down yet, but I am going to do a 1 year, Andor 1 year later show We were supposed to do that in September, but with everything else that was going on with Ahsoka, we just didn't have the time. But I'll have Gus on from Triad of the Force. And I made the joke. I mean, it's a Puerto Rican and a Mexican. So what's the worst that can happen on that show? But he'll be with me on that show at some point. We're still trying to nail down a time. We'll record that live, of course, and get that out to you guys as well. So, all right, Lauren, while I try to scramble to find the end credits, any final words before we get out of here?
I can't believe it's been a year since Andor. That's crazy.
I know. It really
It feels
has.
like it was like 3 months ago.
I know. Yeah. Time flies, man. So, all right, guys. We'll see you guys Sunday.
You're still listening? Wow. That's amazing. Well, I'm here to give you the disclaimer. Normally we do a big, long, drawn-out disclaimer thing saying what's what and who's what and all that other stuff, but I think you guys kind of know that Lucasfilm and Disney have no affiliation with us at all, and we have none with them. We talk about Star Wars, which is their property and all that other good, fun stuff, but I think you can tell which is our stuff and which is their stuff. If you can't, well, then send a lawyer to send an email to me, and I'll be glad to chat with them. Other than that, you know what's what, so that's your disclaimer.